All right. Well, welcome everyone. We're excited. We just keep seeing more and more people logging in, and we're gonna wait another minute or so and get started. But we're excited around this conversation around legacy. My wife Danielle and my business partner, and also Dan Scott. We've been talking about this conversation around legacy for so long, and how families and advisors really been needing to embrace this. I shared this on I believe it was on our last legacy project conversation, how we were working with a very successful family, and I recognized that they were seeking something more than just at the moment, and our business model at that time was only around life insurance, and it wasn't a legacy planning business model, and it really brought us into this mindset of how do we help these families that are looking for more. And today we're gonna be talking about a conversation that we call the five capitals conversation. On the screen that's around you, you're gonna be seeing these PowerPoint rotating, and on there it's gonna have five different types of capitals. That's what right now it's on the screen. That's what we're going to be discussing today: the financial capital, intellectual capital, human capital, spiritual capital, and human capital. So it's those five capitals that really make up the five capitals conversation, and we're going to talk about how does that apply to families. And like I mentioned on earlier, we want this to be a conversation. Dan and I and Danielle are going to be having a conversation today, and we're gonna start it for the first maybe 10 minutes just with kind of setting context. But we really would like those of you that are on the call to open up your mic and let's have a discussion. Let's have a conversation, because anything that you're going to share, as long as we're being respectful of one another, is going to really tremendously benefit the other people that are on the line that may be thinking that, or maybe having a question similar to yours that maybe they're not asking. So I just would encourage you guys to share, to open up your mic. And there's two ways you can do that. You can text your question in, and you can write it in on the screen, or you can raise your hand. There's a hand part on your side, on your panel. You can raise it, and we'll open up your mic, and we'll be able to have a conversation around it. So we're gonna jump in. Welcome to Maze Legacy Project. I hope all of you are doing well. I know right now around the nation, it's been globally, it's been very difficult, obviously, with everything that's going on with COVID-19. We're hoping that this conversation will be a little bit of a light, a little bit of a refresher, and kind of take off some of that load. But we're going to get into this conversation, and I'm going to start with one thing that I really think is key, and that is, for so many years, I've been doing this now close to 20 years. If you want to be accurate, I'm 18 years into my career. And from a lot of the career, I started with talking about the financial assets. But then what I realized over time is that people were really craving to discuss some of the other assets. And I'll share this, is that I know that the financial assets are extremely important to that family. But it's the other four assets that typically have created that wealth: the intellectual, the social capital, the human capital, and the spiritual capital. So I want to kind of define some of those, and then Dan and I and Danielle are going to get into a conversation around it. The financial capital is obviously, it's pretty simple. It's our bank accounts, our investment accounts, our real estate, all the things that we traditionally would call financial assets, right? But then we have our intellectual assets. This is the universities that we've gone to. This is our intellectual knowledge that we've had, the wisdom that we've collected over the years, right? How do we build that into a legacy plan? And then we have our human capital. I'm sorry. Then we have our social capital. And on our last legacy project, I spoke about how social capital is so important. My wife and I own a couple of businesses, and in the other business, which is a leadership and business coaching company, we have doors that open because of our social capital, relationships that we've had for so many years that would take others a decade to get an opportunity that could take us an hour or 10 minutes of a conversation. That's social capital. And how do you manage that capital well is important when it comes to your legacy and our clients' legacies. Then we have human capital. Is how do we develop the unique skill sets of the people that are around us? How do we develop and nurture those who have maybe a gift of sales or those who have a gift of marketing? So that would be fall underneath the human capital, and then spiritual capital. And when I say spiritual capital, I'm not necessarily meaning from a religious standpoint. I'm talking more from spiritual capital of what are these traditions that the family has kept for a long period of time. And some of them may be around the religious faith. Some of them may be around Shabbat, or some of them may be around, Christmas or any other religious holiday. Or it could also be just family traditions. We get together twice a year in the winter and in the summer for our families to come together and really enjoy each other's company. So these are the 5 capitals, and we're going to talk about that today. So Dan, I want to hand it to you and just kind of get your thoughts on it. Then we'll Daniela will open up into a discussion with us, and then anyone who has any questions at any point, just raise your hand, and we're going to open up your line.
Sure. Thank you, Chad, and thank you for everybody joining. I think the reason we chose this as our first more technical conversation is because the idea of the 5 capitals is really kind of the cornerstone of legacy planning and sort of the different approach that we are trying to take and encouraging others to take when it comes to planning. Because the one thing I think everybody on this call has in common is, whether you are an estate planning attorney, an accountant, a wealth advisor, etc., we are all working with assets and understanding what an individual's assets are is critical when it comes to planning with them. And so I think we are all familiar with the idea of financial assets. I think that's traditionally what we think of when we refer to assets as your property in terms of investments, stock markets, real estate, etc. And traditional financial planning, traditional estate planning deals primarily with financial assets. Your estate, by definition, is the property that you own and some rights and things that you have around other properties that you own at your death. And so what's really missing from a sort of collective professional approach is an understanding and an integration of these other assets into our planning: the human capital, the spiritual capital, the intellectual capital, and the social capital. And if you think about going back to the definition of legacy, the idea that what we are trying to do from an estate planning, from a death planning perspective, to the extent that we are trying to preserve someone's legacy, it is really intended to reflect the totality of that human's life, their life purpose, as opposed to merely the financial assets they owned. And to the extent that we adopt a proactive, forward approach in terms of helping someone build their legacy, again, it's building who they are as a human. And really, the assets that are critical, I would say that they are more important, are those non-financial assets. And so the challenge becomes, and this is, I think, where we're going with this conversation, is how do you plan, right? How do you integrate these, intangibles into daily planning, whether you're, again, a financial advisor, an estate planning lawyer, et cetera? How do we create a practice and a discipline around getting clients to think about it? And then, technically speaking, how do we create structures and manage these assets and start treating them like assets with value? So this is a very important conversation. It's really sort of the foundation, I think, for a lot of what's to follow. And so, yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
Awesome. Yeah, so Danielle, you want to lead this conversation, and anyone who has questions, they'll jump in and raise their hand, and we'll turn this into a real conversation.
Okay. I'm going to apologize if there is an echo, since my husband and I do live together. Maybe, and we're in similar corners. But I just love the conversation of legacy planning and bringing awareness around it. Scott, you just said Dan, sorry, Dan. You just said about life's purpose, right? And building the legacy. It's not about just the financial assets. And when we see legacy, I think people think of the destination, not the journey. So if you could just talk about just a few more of those capitals and why they're so important, and not just the financial as an attorney, right, who focuses on legacy planning. What is it about the other capitals besides financial that help them to create or focus on their journey and not just that destination?
Sure. So let's go back. This is something we talked about, I think, a little bit in the first conversation, right? And again, so I just want to kind of remind everyone, because I think sometimes the perspective is so different, it needs some clarification before we get into the conversation. We've talked about this idea of generational wealth, and I think in our first conversation, or maybe it was the one with John, what I was emphasizing is really that, what we're not seeking is really wealth for wealth's sake. And I think the financial planning industry understands this now, right? We're talking about goals-oriented investing, and really assets, financial or otherwise. It's not an asset for an asset's sake, right? It's an asset. The value of that asset is derived from its application, right? My dollar is worth what I do with it. And so really, it's less about wealth and more about opportunity. So assets equal opportunity. And so, again, going back to the different capitals, these are different forms of assets. And really what these are in terms of how to invest them, I look at these as, again, this is the proactive planning. Thinking about working with a client and building their life and building their legacy and proactively managing their assets. Or if you're working with a multi-generational family, excuse me, and you're working with the younger generation in terms of helping them plan their life and life goals. It is about, once you identify the goal, the purpose, in a sense, right? Once this is who I am, this is what I stand for, this is the life I want to live. That is a whole other process and conversation in terms of getting to that. But sort of once you understand what your life's purpose is, and I think, again, this goes back to being a parent, right? You want your children to live happy, fulfilled lives. So once you understand what that is, what is going to bring you human fulfillment, then it becomes a question of, well, how do you accomplish this? How do you accomplish your goals? And the answer to that is, well, what do you have to work with, right? And that really means, what are your assets? I mean, right? And so if you think about that, now you're problem solving. So now let's go back to the type of assets. Financial assets are wonderful. If you have financial assets, well, you can start a business, you can fund financially, potentially, that opportunity. You can bring it to life through financial assets. Money equals opportunity. Now, for a lot of people, they don't have the money necessarily to do that. They don't have the financial assets, sufficient. So it becomes a question of, what else do you have to work with? And this is where you can really sit down with a client and help them understand that who you are. Let's break that down. Your greatest asset is who you are. And so how can we help develop those assets? How can we use your strengths? How can we identify your weaknesses and help you invest in and grow those? But, a key one for me in my practice, I work with a lot of creatives and people sort of, in that space, where, relationships are incredibly important. And so relationships is social capital, and people don't understand that if you want to get from A to B, sometimes it's a matter of navigating who you know to get there. And so looking at, I like that scene. I don't know if, I'm dating myself, but there was that movie, there's Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks. And there's a moment where, the engineers get in a room and they throw all this junk on a table. And they say, this is what we have to work with. How do we create an air duct or whatever they were trying to create? Like, that's what we have to do as planners, is we sit down and go, well, what do you have to work with? What are your assets? And if we limit ourselves to financial assets, we're, very quickly, you're going to hit a wall with a lot of clients. And they're going to feel defeated. And we're not going to really do our job best to help them build that life. So helping them understand that, intellectual capital, what do you want to do? You want to be an astronaut? Well, you need intellectual capital for that. You have to know, right? So now we can start to carve a path in terms of how to get to accomplishing your life goal. And that is a combination of investing with your assets to accomplish that. So maybe you have a relationship with somebody at a certain school that can help get you into that school to build, invest with your social capital to build your intellectual capital, things like that. And so understanding that what I think the 5 capitals does really well, and I'm maybe this will improve over time, is it really does break down in essence what we have to work with as humans. We have our financial, we have our money and resources, we have our relationships, we have our knowledge, we have our individuality, which is the human capital, our passions and things like that, what makes us tick, and then we have our spiritual, our core values, our spiritual beliefs. I'm not sure what else there is beyond that, right? And so, maybe this will expand over time and we'll have 10 capitals, I don't know, but for now, this is what we're dealing with, and this is sort of the knowledge that's out there. So as advisors, if our job is to help our clients navigate and build their life, we need to be able to help them invest in and with all of their assets, and that's life planning. And then when you talk about preserving, what someone is on death, it's looking at all of those assets in terms of who they are, and in terms of generational, again, not wealth, but generational opportunity. It becomes about preserving those in a way that those assets can be continually invested for the fulfillment of family members and other generations. So, I think that's, I think that answers your question.
Yeah,
Dan, I wanted to throw this out, and then I want to open up I'd like us to open up, and anyone who has questions or comments on what was said, just raise your hand and we'll open that up. I think, Dan, the key, and it was a real struggle for me, because I went from our business model being very, very around tax efficiency. Everything was tax driven, and then I transitioned it into being a tax efficient, legacy minded model, right? But I think that for me, the key was having to replace the word or with and. So I think a lot of advisors, at least in my perspective, and I think families even struggle with that, where they think it has to be a tax plan or a legacy plan. And I really think that what we're saying here with this legacy project is really, it's the merging of both of them in the end, right? So I'd love to open up the mics of anyone who has to comment on some of the things we've shared. All you need to do is just raise your hand and we'll open up the mic.
And Chad, if I could just add quickly to that, I mean, we are, the culture is obviously a very tax-driven culture in planning, and all tax planning really is asset planning, right? I mean, being tax efficient or avoiding, paying taxes is just a way of keeping more financial assets. And so there's nothing wrong with being, with tax planning, but understand that all that is doing is addressing the financial asset component again. And so what we're trying to shift is to understand that there's a whole lot more to plan with aside from your financial assets, and pure tax planning is sort of value neutral in the sense, and when you talk about purpose, it doesn't accomplish anything other than keeping more financial assets in your estate or in your bank account.
That makes a lot of sense. I know that there was a question that came through. Hold on one second.
Yes. I'd love to open up their mic if Paul is, Paul's from Palm Beach Gardens. And if he's available.
You guys hear me?
Okay, great. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, guys. Hey, Daniel, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing well.
Good. So I just, I'm thinking about what you guys are talking about, and all the things are so very important for legacy planning and just legacy building for families. How I guess when you think about it, the first capital is what everyone cares most about, is the financial capital. How open, and are people surprised when you start asking questions about legacy building, hey, money is important, assets are important, but are they typically open to start talking about this legacy building and other capitals that, intellectual capital, social capital, human capital? Are they open to that?
Yeah. So Paul, I'll share this with you. It's a great question. In our practice, we have to be very sensitive to where people are, because not everyone is open for that conversation. But one of the things that I think is important is when we ask people, what is it that you want to accomplish? They will tell you what they want to accomplish. I want to make sure, as an example, if you're an attorney, right, or a financial advisor, I want to have X amount of money in retirement. I want to make sure that these assets get to my kids, and God forbid of a divorce, it doesn't go to their ex-spouse. I think families can verbalize those things. As advisors, the question isn't tell me what you want to do with your intellectual capital, social capital, spiritual capital, and the other capitals. The question is more, and just listen to what I'm saying, it's why. So as an example, if you were to say to me, well, I want to make sure that I protect the assets in the event, God forbid, my child gets divorced, the next question is why? And tell me a little bit more about that. Why is that so important to you? Because what will happen is that eventually you ask enough questions and you get away from the surface and you start getting to some of the meat of the matter, right? Then I get to the point where I start saying, well, I think what I'm hearing is that you really care about keeping the family unit together and making sure that this wealth is here for the family to be able to live off of for future generations, or to give them opportunities. And oh yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Well, perhaps did you ever think about maybe more effectively, instead of trying to just plan for your financial assets, maybe we plan for other assets? And they're like, well, what do you mean? What other assets? And now we're in a conversation, but I think it always starts with understanding why, and the question of, well, tell me more about that, because most people are making decisions. Listen, like I said, and Paul, I know you personally, we have another company, a coaching company, and most people, what they say with their mouth is not what they mean with their heart, unfortunately. So our job as advisors is to really understand what they mean in their heart, and then help them verbalize it with their mouth. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah.
Are they open to? Oh, go ahead.
Paul, I'm gonna, when you say that financial capital is sort of the first capital, I'm going to challenge you on that, because I think it's the only capital they know of, and that's why it appears that's the first capital they want to talk about. In my experience, and I think in Chad's experience, we've done some things where we've gotten like families together around dinner and things, is that once you start to kind of crack open the conversation, there's an extraordinary sort of relief. Because, I think increasingly, and this is part of the driving force behind this movement, is, like we do know today that money doesn't equal happiness. I think that happiness and human fulfillment are really on people's radar today. And when it comes to planning for your kids and planning for multiple generations, I think there's a concern about just leaving money to your kids and what that means and the effect that it has and all these other things. And so I think the conversation is overwhelmingly welcome by families. The challenge, and this again is part of the reason that we're having this group and this dialogue, is it is challenging when Chad or I sit down and we're the first time that they're hearing about these 5 capitals, right? Because now we have to overcome the hurdle of getting them to understand something that's not culturally ingrained in their understanding of the world. And so the idea behind the Legacy Project very much is to try to shift, from an industry perspective, the conversation. Because if we're all talking about the 5 capitals, if we're all talking about human assets, then it's going to be easier for all of us to have that conversation, and we're going to all be doing better by the client in that sense. So, what we're trying to do is collectively sort of build a new way of doing things, build a practice together that where we have a common common dialogue and phrases and all that we use together, and we develop best practices together around how to implement this. Because I think is, as we continually have these conversations, the response overwhelmingly is this is the right direction to go. And so one of the hurdles is to your point, it's new for clients to hear. And part of the reason that it's new is because it's not the standard. We want to make it the standard, and the only way we know how to do that is to rally as many people as we can to form a group to say this is going to become the new standard, and this is what we all need to start talking about, writing about, etc. So this is really we're biting off a big piece or whatever you want to call it, but that's sort of the intention here, because there is right now it is more challenging because it's not the standard, but once we get over it, they understand.
Okay.
To share,
Hey,
quickly on our experience though too, and to go with Dan, what you're saying, it's the awareness. I think originally they are coming to us with financial, because of the financial situation and looking to leave their legacy or structure it. But what I love most is that the social, when you speak to people about their social capital, they cannot believe that relationships are so important. And Paul, knowing you, I know that's something that you have, and sharing them with our clients, those other capitals are just amazing. And Chad, maybe you could share a little bit about that, the social capital aspect. And
yeah, I thank you. I think that as advisors, no matter what area we focus in, whether we're a wealth manager, attorney, an accountant, a family office, a trustee, that whatever capacity we play, I think our job is to help guide advisors. And I say this all the time, that when clients hire attorneys, they don't hire attorneys because of the legal documents that they print out. They hire attorneys because the wisdom and the insight that they bring to the table, that is why they're bringing that attorney on their team, right? And that same thing holds true with our social capital. Danielle, obviously but we do a lot of work in the family business space. Entrepreneurs, family business owners, right? And I see it all too often that in the attempt to not want to share and disclose all their information, they hold everything close to their chest. But really, from a social capital standpoint, the families that I've seen that do it best and thrive and have the highest chances of having a true legacy, even in a business, those are the ones that bring their kids into the conversations with their advisors, into the conversations with their banker. Now you think about this, right? And I don't know if many of you on the call do a lot of work with business owners, but business owners typically, to get to where they went, they had to obviously build up relationships, they had to have intellectual capital, financial capital, but also social capital. They built relationships with bankers, with institutions that feel comfortable with the founder or the person who's running the enterprise, right? Well, God forbid that person had a heart attack the next day. I want to pose this question to all of the advisors today, for your business owner clients. God forbid they had a heart attack and died today. Would their banking institutions continue to lend those lines of credits to them? Would those banking institutions continue to provide loans of working capital, right? Because a lot of that is built on social capital. A lot of that, I've seen businesses that say, I felt comfortable with your dad, but I don't feel comfortable with you. So we're willing to extend ourselves with your dad because we have a 40-year track record. But with you, I don't even know you. Whereas I think when we look at our social capital, businesses that do it well and families that do it well and really build their legacies, they allow these people into conversations. It doesn't mean they disclose everything. It means that they bring them in. Maybe they invite their son or daughter or family member into that conversation with the banker, or if they're going to a ball game with their banker, they say, listen, I want to bring my nephew with me who's in the business. This is Johnny. I mentioned on our last call how I do that with my niece, Crystal. She's going to turn 18 years old, but since 7 years old, Danielle and I have been putting her around us. And every time we're at an event, we point to her, and this is our niece. One day she may be coming into one of our businesses, and give her a kiss on her forehead and tell her how much we love her, right? Well, that's my social capital. That's my wife's social capital. And we want to make sure that if God forbid something happens to us, whether it's today or 20 years or 50 years from now, right, that we've equipped the next generation and we've also given them access to our social networks. So it's so important that we as advisors help them plan. And you want to know what? And I think this is the struggle. I think the struggle more than anything is that we don't get paid. Most advisors do not get paid for that. But I think that's where the value is added when, a wealth manager who's been working with that family for 20 years says to that family business owner and says, have you been bringing your son or daughter into your conversations with your advisors? No. Why? Why should I do that? Because God forbid something happens to you, those lines of credits may be pulled immediately. What happens to your business if that happens? Oh, I didn't think of that. So these are things I think as advisors, I think the best advisors are the ones that get out of their comfort zone for the benefit of the client. So I just wanted to share that. Social capital is huge, guys, and we all have it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I'd love to open up Sherry's line. Sherry, are you there?
Sherry,
Okay,
there?
am I unmuted now?
Yep,
Yeah.
we can
Or
hear
am I
you.
still-
Hi,
Hi,
Sharon.
how are you?
Good, how are you?
I am fabulous. I'm sorry, did you have a question for me? Because I've been sitting here rather quietly.
You did write, I believe we wrote a statement, so I just thought it would be great if you wanted to discuss it.
I did not write a statement. Perhaps you have it under the wrong name.
Okay, is this Sherry Dim?
Yes. And I was the person who had trouble with the sound.
Okay.
Oh, okay, that's good. I have something here. It says, we are all dealing with so many new things that we never know which one it will be.
I met with the sound problems.
Oh, well, that is I love that.
Well, Sherry, welcome to the conversation.
Well, and let me just add to that. So one of the things I was thinking about typing in, which I'll just throw out there, is I work for a nonprofit in the Create a Jewish Legacy program, helping to build. And the reason that I am on this call and that I've been participating is that we're trying to reach out to legacy advisors and wealth advisors to remind people to include the nonprofits in their legacy plans and how important the line or the statement is to, have you, because a lot of people, when they do their legacy planning, they're obviously thinking about continuing their family wealth and continuing their business, but they neglect to remember the organizations that are so important to them and their family throughout. And we're trying to find ways to clue advisors into sharing that information with the people that they're planning.
Yeah.
Especially like we have certain people that said that a percentage of their legacy has to be designated to a particular organization or things like that. But we want to make sure that we include both, the future generation so they have the same ownership.
Yeah, Sherry, I love that point because, when you look at someone's checkbook, right, it tells you what matters to them. And you see this probably every day where you see, okay, they have X amount of money coming to your organization or another organization, right? But when that person passes away, that doesn't mean that organization doesn't have a need. And secondly, it doesn't mean that maybe that person didn't want to continue to support that organization upon their passing and really build a legacy around it. But it comes back to kind of what we're talking about today. It's a conversation, and we as advisors, and I heard this one day from one of our coaches many years ago. He said, Chad, you need to have the professional courage conversations. And as advisors, I think we need to have those professional courage conversations because I know as we continue to plan out our legacy is not just leaving financial assets to our family, but there is an element of wanting to help and give back to society. And I would really want my advisors to be having that conversation with me. And sometimes it just takes the courage to have it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you, Sherry.
Thank you, Sherry. That seemed like such a great question, though, right? It says, are we all dealing with so many new things? And because of the new season that we are in, maybe we could direct just some of these capitals now to like, what awareness do we want to bring to those now that feel like they're entering a new norm, or a new, I just heard somebody say that they're dropping the new norm and they're saying new opportunities. I think this season is now bringing awareness to especially future generations and what they want to live and lead.
You know, I'm thinking of this, Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know if you guys know who Gary V is, or Gary Vaynerchuk. He's very big in the social media space, and he just partnered with someone to create this movement where celebrities are using their social capital to raise financial capital. So instead of asking the celebrity to write a check, they're asking them to donate something of extreme value, and then people are bidding on it for the money to be raised and to be given to organizations that need it during COVID-19. And I just think about it, how great of a steward of that, how great is that person who's stewarding their social capital? Because sometimes the impact we make doesn't even have to be financial capital. Like as an example, I saw Justin Bieber. He was doing a concert with him, and then a trip to California with him, right? And really, he was just giving his time. He wasn't even writing checks, and people were bidding on it. I think it was a 6-figure bid on that, and that's going back to organizations and areas that have been tremendously impacted by this pandemic. So how do we utilize those 5 capitals to accomplish our clients' goals, to accomplish, to be more intentional with it? And just so everyone knows, these recordings are going to be on the Legacy Project YouTube page. So if you ever want to go back and listen to it, or share it with others, or even comment on some of the stuff that was on there, you can go to the Legacy Project YouTube page, and you'll see on there, there's only 2 of them right now because we just launched this project, but you'll see the event we did with John Maxwell, you'll see the one last month we did with Jonathan Blockmacher, and then this month, and then every month moving forward.
So I love that you just brought that up. And it's so true, right? The way people have been so creative in this environment, especially around social capital. You don't even look at that with the celebrities and the athletes as we see it as capital, but when you put it in the words of social capital, it just brings a whole new meaning to it. Dan, you work with a lot of celebrities and athletes. Can you share anything on that topic, and any creative things, or just how do you speak to them about these capitals, and which ones do you see popular? I think he may be first. It's a good shot.
He either froze or he's really good at that game.
All right, I think he's coming back. You have to love these webinars now.
Danielle, you and I were talking about this before we got started, and the whole purpose of this is a conversation, and it's not designed to be perfect. I think all too often we feel like we have to be so perfect that we miss the point.
I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, I just turned off my webcam because it told me to on account of my connection. So Danielle, I'm sorry, you started to address me and I lost you.
And I thought you were looking at me so intensely, trying to.
Yes, I was frozen. I was frozen in awe, Daniel.
That's what it looked like. It was a perfect shot.
Yeah.
I was just sharing, you work with, a lot of celebrities and athletes. So social media, Chad just brought up such a great point. We look at them, they're being so creative in this scene, and it gave a whole new meaning, right, of what social capital is, the relationships, and also the status or your titles or whatever you want to say that, attracts others. What would you say right now is creative in that time, in this time now? And also, which one of these capitals seem to be important to them, and how is that conversation?
it's a lot to unpack there. When you said what seems to be creative now, I mean, look, we work with at Spotlight, what we call creatives, and it's basically anyone who's really making a public impact. And so it's, artists and athletes and entrepreneurs and anyone, sort of with a public facing life. And so they have different types of capitals, right? I mean, there's a whole other category of capital that we talk about for our clients. In addition to the financial and the 5 capitals, we have a category we call creative capital, and it's really based around some of the things you touched on, that they have an audience, which ordinary people don't necessarily have, and that is an asset that can be invested in and invested with. Their likeness and image and persona is potentially an asset. They have a body of work or public facing accomplishments, all of these different things. And so they have, working with creatives is unique because, I categorize the assets: financial assets, 1, the 4 other capitals: social, spiritual, human, and intellectual. We categorize as all human capital because it relates to the person. And then the 3rd category being creative, which, kind of ties into the creative legacy of the individual. So in terms of, it's really unique, I guess, depending on the type of person you're dealing with. But most, to sort of generalize, there's a relationship with an audience. And so staying engaged with an audience right now is critical. For, what we talk about at Spotlight is really creating an enterprise, and a creative enterprise, with turning creativity into a sustainable life. And in order to do that, there's essentially 3 components that we focus on in our legacy planning. And the first is, authentic message, which really is sort of going to the core truth of who the person is, the creative is. The second is, taking that authentic message and delivering it. So content, right? Content platforms. And that's where, in today's world, social media is a sort of obvious digital content platform that everybody owns. And then the third piece of that is sort of monetizing. So once you kind of know who you are and deliver that message, now you have an engaged audience that you can generate revenue from. So, in today's world, and this isn't, I guess, every business has potentially a digital presence. And so, active engagement with an audience is important. And I think, I think authentic messaging is really the foundation for everyone's life. I think that comes down to, to speak in terms that we were talking about, that goes to your purpose, right? Your purpose is who you are, and that should be your authentic message.
Yeah, Dan, what I'd like to do maybe in about 3 to 5 minutes is for those. Oh, welcome back.
I don't see you guys now, though. I'm just trying to see if it works.
But we can see you. But what I'd like to do for those that are on the call is I'd like to open up a few of their mics. In wrapping, we probably have about another 15 minutes or so. I'd like to open up 3 mics. And I think it's helpful for people that are on the call, because we always do this talking about their biggest takeaway. And I find that people learn so much more from others when they share what their takeaway was from this conversation. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is, many of you were on the John Maxwell event. I think all of you were on the John Maxwell event that we did April 9th around leading clients through crisis. And one of the things that I really want to do, and Danielle and I want to do for you guys, is the 3 people that share their biggest takeaway, we're going to overnight one of John Maxwell's books to you as a way of saying thank you, but also as a way of really you being able to invest in this community. Because the conversation, we definitely don't want it to only be Dan and myself and Danielle and Jonathan Blattmacher and our conversation. We want to really open it up. And one of the things that helps us opening it up is understanding what you got out of it, because it's also going to help the many people that are on this call today. Because we probably have people on the call from anywhere from 10 to 15 states. So maybe even more than that. Anyone who would want to ask, we're not going to ask you now. We're in about 3 minutes. We're going to open up lines. But anyone who would want to open up your mic and share what your biggest takeaway was from today's conversation, we will be overnighting a book to you, a John Maxwell book, to say thank you. But we're going to continue the conversation for another 3 to 5 minutes, and then we'll open up the mic, and you can just, raise your hand and we'll do that.
So just back to what we were talking about, in terms of COVID and what, what I have seen, generally speaking, is in terms of a positive, is that this has been a time of reflection for a lot of people. And so when you talk about the different types of capitals, I think this is when, people are thinking beyond financial capital, whether or not they realize it, and they're thinking about their life purpose or their mortality in some of these aspects. And so it has led to a lot of deeper conversations. I had a conversation with a client who, kind of related it back to 9/11, which was a life-changing moment for him. And, it was sort of a, I'm going to do what I have to do. I'm going to live my life, my purpose, my legacy. And that's hugely important. It's really about empowerment, at the end of the day. And a lot of, I guess, to speak to a larger message, a lot of people are lost. A lot of people are unhappy. And it's, part of that is because of the cultural norms that we've created, right? We've created a society that is, financially driven, not purpose driven, and all of these things. And so to open up and to start having conversations around helping people realize that, they don't have to be a slave to the grind, so to speak, right? That life is not about your bank account so much, and that you can build a sustainable, fulfilling life when you look at the totality of your capitals and assets and invest those wisely. And I think that's sort of an underlying, or underpinning kind of message that we're, where we're coming from.
Awesome.
I think this is the best time for advisors. As you said, reflection, I got the word reset. And some people, as they're reflecting, they're realizing that they could reset and do some things now that they may have not been able to do. And I think that they are coming now with more awareness on how can I be more purposeful? What is my purpose? How do I take care of my family better? What are my priorities? So I think right now, the season, we're in, and for this legacy project, as we're just bringing awareness, is really just in perfect timing. So if anybody wants to have the conversation, this is definitely now the time to have that conversation or revisit it.
Yeah.
And I'll say, right, guys, this isn't for everybody, right? At the end of the day, there are people in this world that are, driven purely by things like power and status or what they perceive, right? I'm sorry, I don't have time to work with those people, right? So I think on this call, look at yourself and your own priorities. And if, if you're somebody just driven by, luxury and excess, and that's sort of how you see the world, sometimes you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and you gotta, spend your time where you can be valuable. But I'm confident that is not most of the world, even though sometimes they are the louder voices. And so I think what we're doing resonates with most people. I think we are playing, if you're talking about scale, I think that, I come from a position that people are inherently good and, and care about these things and want to feel a sense of purpose. And going back to our other conversation, right? Studies show that to the extent we all understand the idea that, we want to be happy, right? Whatever happiness is. Well, studies show that happiness really is derived from a sense of purpose, of serving a purpose. And that's now, we kind of scientifically know that now. And so encouraging people down that direction, that it's not about having another Lamborghini, right? Like that's not necessarily going to be fulfilling. So you have to find happiness first, and then the Lamborghini is a hell of a lot of fun if you can afford it. Right?
Right?
But,
Dan, I would love to join John Hilton into this conversation.
Yep.
John, are you there?
I am here. Good morning.
Good morning, John.
Welcome.
Well, first of all, I just want to, I am so excited about this forum and this project. I am an estate planning attorney. I've been in practice for about 2 years. It's a third career for me. And when I started my practice, my whole intent was to build it around legacy for my clients, but I've been struggling with that, not really knowing how to break in to the, I guess, the curiosity questions. And I think my biggest takeaway today is, number one, I'm not alone. That the struggle is real for many more people. I was feeling a little discouraged that I didn't seem to quite get it. And I think, and so my takeaway today is that it's really just a matter of continuing to ask those probing questions, and to expand my I guess my scope of what legacy is. So I'm just really excited about it, and I'm excited about learning more and participating in this process.
That's awesome. Well, we're glad to have you join us. And the book we're going to be sending to you, John, just so you know, is Everyone Communicates, Few Connect by John Maxwell. So we'll be getting that out to you. If you can do this though, John, just text into the message just your address that you want it sent to, and we'll get that out to you. And we appreciate it.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you, John. And those were encouraging words too. We know we're doing a good thing here. Okay.
And John, it's one of the reasons we said this, right, is we knew that we weren't alone, and we wanted to create a forum and a community of like-minded, legacy-minded professionals. And, so we're glad you're here.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyone else want to open up their mic and just share biggest takeaway? And we'll be getting that book out to you as well. So I see, hold on, is there anyone else here?
Yes, I see Woody Baldwin.
Oh, great.
Just let us know when your mic is open.
I'm ready.
Hey, Woody.
Hello. I thank you for the opportunity. This has been great. I really appreciate the conversation. I think the biggest takeaway so far for me is that, like investing, this is something that needs to be done early in life. It seems to be the better you do it, the sooner you do it, the better your plan is going to be. And as such, you need to bring the children into the conversation with the parents. But I have a question from that takeaway is the parents don't always seem to want to let the children know what's going on.
Yeah.
They want to make their plan and then reveal it after their death. How do you encourage the parent to open up to the children about what they have and what can be done?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is how I answer it with our clients, because I promise you that even though we have a legacy planning practice, I'm still dealing with everything that everyone else is dealing with, because people are human, right? And humans have predictable behaviors. There's a book actually called Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely, meaning as humans, we are predictably so irrational, right? And this is what I say to them though. I say, Mrs. Jones, we've just spent a good amount of time preparing and getting everything in order. And I think you got some peace of mind. Yeah. Now, if we don't take the next step, which is bringing the family and engaging them in this conversation, when you and your husband have that peace of mind, but your children don't. Now, isn't the purpose to have the family to have peace of mind? So that's the first thing, because I think a lot of people don't realize that because they have peace of mind doesn't mean that the kids have peace of mind or the grandkids have peace of mind. And then the second thing is letting them know that if this is something that you'd like to kind of go to the next level with, I would love to be working with you and your family just to facilitate a conversation around some of the stuff that you've done. And Mrs. Jones, know this. I will only share to the extent you feel comfortable with. So as an example, if you only want to share high level 30,000 foot view of what you've done, we could do that. And then if you want to go deeper, you let me know. And that's how I handle a lot of our family meetings, Woody, and when we're working with families, because I always want them to feel comfortable, but I also, as an advisor who deeply cares about that family, I want to be able to move them forward but not so much that the fear paralyzes them. I want to empower them to move forward and let them know that if they don't want to go that far into the conversation, that's okay. And Woody, I've had families that have said to me, Chad, I'm okay. I want them to know we created a trust and we created it for the purposes of reducing our estate value, and we created it to let them know that God forbid of divorce and liability risks and stuff, that they're protected. Great, so let's share that. Our job is to get the conversation going. I always believe that momentum begets more momentum. So if we could help a family get a little bit of momentum, it's better than no momentum. And little by little, as we work with them and we hold their hand, I think we'll have a better chance of really helping that, empower that family. I don't know if that helps, but I think that was the question.
It does. Great. Thank you.
If I
So
could
I just wanted,
just add
oh, go
to
ahead.
that, I just want to add to that, when you talk about conversations with family, again, once you would adopt the five capitals mindset, I think when you talk about, families or parents don't want to talk about that or share with their children, what you're really talking about is the financial capital, right? They don't want to let them know that there's $100 million in the bank or there's a $1 billion company. And so it's really about sharing the numbers that parents are often concerned about. Once you explain or adopt the five capitals approach, really you can shift the conversation. You never have to tell them the numbers. So don't talk about how much the company is worth. Talk about why you built the company. Talk about all the other factors.
Right.
And those are conversations that lay the foundation. So you never really need to share the dollar amount. You need to share all the values. And that's point one. And point two would be, also to explain to them, when you start doing legacy planning, this idea of family enterprise and comparing it, whether or not you actually have a family business or not, that it needs to function like a business. And I think most people understand that, you don't, when you have a successor to a business, a CEO or something, there's a grooming and a training process. You don't just tell someone the day that you leave that, hey, you're taking over the company. And so making them understand that there's a process to graduating to taking over. Again, you don't need to know all of the numbers per se, but you need to know how everything works, and most importantly, why everything works. Those are conversations I think that they would be much more open to, and will ease their concerns. I'm gonna go on mute, guys. My landscaper's here, so I don't know if you hear that.
Okay, no, he's out.
Okay, we don't hear it though. Woody, if you can put in your box, just put your address of where you want that book to be sent, and we'll be sending you the Everyone Communicates Few Connect book by John Maxwell. Thank you.
I just wanted to share, thank you, Woody. I just wanted to share a little bit on that too, and I can't help it, but it keeps tugging on me that we are designed to have control. So I think with us being the guide for the client and allowing them to have control of how much they want to share, and us just coaching them through it and being there for them as supportive, but really allowing them to navigate through that conversation. I just think that's a big key of what we do.
Awesome. And we got one more book. So if anyone else wants to share what their biggest takeaway was, just raise your hand and we'll give one more book away. If you raise your hand, we'll open up your mic.
Or any questions?
All right. Well, we were excited to spend time with you guys. The whole purpose of this is just to continue a conversation. Every month, we're just going to keep, talking about a different topic, opening up the mic, and really just trying to build a conversation with the ultimate goal of eventually, as we get back to some normality in this country, to eventually start doing these. The first city that we're going to build an in-person legacy project community event is going to probably be in New York City. But then we're going to be looking to do those in other cities that we have, a lot of people that are jumping on. Like I mentioned on the John Maxwell event, we had every single state attend that event. So there was a person from every state. And today I'm thinking there's probably about 15 or so states that are represented on this call. We have Lloyd. Lloyd, we're going to open up your mic.
Lloyd, are you there?
Lloyd, can you hear us?
Lloyd, he may be muted on his end.
Yeah, you may need to unmute your end. Hey, one of the things about a conversation is it's real. You're getting to see real, unedited, real people doing real business and really impacting families. So this is realness at its best.
Lloyd, I'm sorry if you're trying to speak, we can't hear you, but please feel free to maybe type it in.
Yep.
And we can share it.
Well, yeah, and if Lloyd, if you open up your mic and you can speak, just speak over me. That's okay. But June 25th is our next event, and like I was saying, we're going to just continue this conversation around legacy. If you have advisors that you work with and you think would be a great fit for this conversation, share the original registration link. The registration link was join GoToWebinar. So this is the actual link if you want anyone to join. You go to join GoToWebinar and put the webinar ID in that's on your screen, the 561-250-819. Because that's the same webinar ID we're going to be using for all of these legacy project conversations every month. But the next one's June 25th. Excited to spend time with you guys. And I don't think Lloyd is able to get in. So we're gonna wrap it up at this point.
Yeah.
I wanted to
Chad, if I can, just in terms of the future, we did today, we sort of had a topic so that we can focus and have, sort of clear discussion and a meaningful discussion and kind of, dig into some of the technical and practical applications of this, now that we've gotten over some of the more kind of just theoretical aspects of it, right? So today we talked a little bit about the capitals and that being a foundation of it. We'll move on to other topics in terms of how we apply this in our practice and how we think it's to be applied in other areas, which is where I think the collaborative effort comes in, right? I mean, this is, I don't think that Chad or I are pretending to have all the answers. And we want input and feedback, and we want to have an engaged dialogue so that we can together build best practices and usher in new standards of planning.
Yeah. I see, just one last thing before we hop off. Lloyd, I see your microphone's open. Can you hear us? Okay. All right, guys. Well, listen, enjoy, be safe out there. We'll see you on June 25th. Share with other advisors in your network. We just want to continue this conversation around legacy. We appreciate you guys. Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.